Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Gaétan Séchaud, and I'm currently working at the Lambda Health System company. And at the same time, I'm working for my master thesis at EPFL in computer science. So I'm going to present you an overview of my project, which is the rehabilitation by mirror therapy through virtual reality in symbiosis with a robotic device. So first, let's introduce the mirror therapy concept. It is really mostly used in the treatment of phantom limbs and for upper limbs rehabilitation. The goal of this therapy is to move a limb in front of a mirror in order to have the illusion that the opposite member is also moving. And this is less used in lower limbs rehabilitation because it is really difficult to move the leg. And so the Lambda robot developed by Lambda Health System offered this opportunity and offer an alternative to this problem. So the Lambda robot is a neuro-rehabilitation robot for lower limbs. It allows to specify particular trajectories in function of needs and physical or psychological situation of the patients. In association with the Ashe Arc, serious games have been developed, and there are possibilities with virtual reality and an haptic feedback provided by the robot, which allows to provide a more immersive dimension to the rehabilitation process. For this project, the goal has been to create a game which combines actually the mirror therapy concept and the possibilities of the robot. The goal in association with the mirror therapy, the two legs execute exactly the same movement. So if one applies some movement, the other leg is also moving. So there exist two modes, the free one and the amplitude one. In the free one, objectives are generated in a virtual environment, and there is an haptic feedback returned when the patient reaches the objective. In the amplitude mode, this is specific for articulations for each part of the leg, and the patient has to cover some zone in function of his capacities. An important aspect of virtual reality, is the immersion, and particularly in rehabilitation. Thanks to the playful aspect of the game, it allows for the patient to forget his own situation and to focus on a precise objective in the game. So the main immersion factors treated for this project are first 3 of our 5 senses, the sight, the hearing, and the touch. There is also the implementation of the virtual limbs, always taking into consideration the point of view of the patient in the game and the physical appearance of the avatar in the game. And finally, the latency, which represents the time from the physical movement of the patient to the graphical representation in the game. When we talk about virtual reality, what comes to our mind is head-mounted display, which allows us to visualize and interact in a virtual environment. But what really tries to do virtual reality is to simulate reality. And what it tries to do is to stimulate our 5 senses in the same way that we do in the real world. And this slide is very interesting because we can clearly see the degree of immersion brought by our 5 senses. So if first we add the view, we have a pretty weak immersion. If we add the hearing, the immersion is really increased, but without reaching a remarkable level. And Finally, if we had the touch sense, in addition to the two previous senses, the immersion is really, really good, but it's considered as difficult to implement for our actual technologies. The Lambda robot tries to provide these three feedbacks. First, thanks to the Oculus, we have the sight and the hearing. And thanks to the robot, we have the haptic feedback. And these three feedbacks, if they are well synchronized and current between them, they allow to activate more network of neurons in the patient. And then the immersion is highly increased, and we have a better efficiency of the exercise. And then there is an acceleration of the processes of the rehabilitation. However, what is the interest of integrating virtual limbs in the game? What does it bring to the patient? In fact, the mirror therapy uses particular neurons, which are called mirror neurons. Typically, if you see me moving my hand, the particular neurons which are activated in your brain are the same that in my brain. We have exactly the same neurons that are activated. And it has been suggested that these neurons are responsible for empathy, consciousness, and in particularly, and this is really interesting in this project, for the learning process by mimicry. To obtain a good coordination between the eye and the leg for the patient, and to have a better impact on mirror neurons, the ideal position of the view of the patient has to be the position the closest to the eye, but it has also been demonstrated that if the movements realized by the avatar in the game are really current to the physical movement of the patient is able to consider this avatar as the representation of its own body. And then in function of the needs of the patient and the limb to move, to work, we are able to place the view in a better position. Concerning the body scaling of the avatar in the game, there is not really a study proving that it's really important for the immersion, but in the Lambda system, we have the possibilities to include the size of the patient and of each parts of the leg. So it has been easy for us to implement this functionality, and it's especially useful for extremes sizes. So for example, for a child or a person measuring 2.20 meters, for example, it's really important to see the difference between them. Unfortunately, we don't have any info on the upper limbs, so we had to implement the most natural position for the legs, for the arms, depending on the size and the inclination of the patient on the chair. The latency is surely the most important factor of the immersion, especially if there is a representation of the patient in the game. It is responsible of the sense of presence and then of the implication of the patient in the game. The sense of presence is compromised if the illusion generated by the virtual environment is broken. And in this case, we would have a patient distracted, and we will lose all the benefits provided by the mirror neurons. So this graph is provided by a study from Jason Gerald, based on 154 people. He tried to measure the latency perceived by each people, and we can clearly see that there are some able to perceive the latency at 100 milliseconds. Others really rare are able to perceive at 3 or 5 milliseconds. But in in rehabilitation, it has been admitted that between 30 or 50 milliseconds, it is really good latency. And for this project, we have been able to apply a latency of 35 milliseconds. And so this is really an acceptable immersion, which allows to get a maximal investment of the patient in the game and an optimal effect of the processes of the rehabilitation. So this game is still in development. We have to improve the playful aspect of the game yet, some precisions. We have not been able to test on real patients yet, but based on previous studies and in the same domain and previous experiments of the Lambda robots, we are really confident about the results of this game. So, thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Gaétan, for your very interesting presentation. Do you have any question? I can start because I have a lot of questions anyway. So you say that at the time now you can't detect the upper body. So for example, the arms. Are you taught to integrate other kind of sensor like Kinect or accelerometers to complete this part, or you think not?
Yeah,
that's relevant?
Actually the main advantage of the Lambda robot is that we don't have to provide anything to the patient. He just has to move his legs on the robot. This is really the advantage because some people don't have enough possibilities of movement. So it is really difficult to integrate additional sensors on them. But yes, that could be a possibility for the future. For example, just some sensors on the end, but it's not the primary goal because we try to work to make the lower limbs work. Yeah. So for now, this is not important, but that could be a possibility. Yes.
Okay. Do you plan also to have it? I think the machine is quite big. Now I saw the picture. You plan to have it in a hospital, or you are also thinking to have it something that you can, I don't know, rent, have it at home for 6 months, 1 year? It's more a business question.
Yes, I'm not the business specialist of this company, but I heard, I'm not sure, that next year this Lambda robot will be available for hospital, and maybe at long term for particular person directly at their home. But yeah, I can't say more because I'm not sure of this.
Okay. So, any question? I think it's okay for this presentation. Thank you a lot.
Thank you.
Here are your attestation. Thank you. So, don't go so far because